الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Now, inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters, bi'ithnillah, this will be dealing with an important topic, especially for all of us who have been born and raised in the West, specifically in America, or in the Western societies, rather. The posing question, okay? So we before we get into that, we just want to mention the title of this particular video we'll be beginning an ongoing discussion, which is known as the American Muslim. Okay, we will talk about the American Muslim, and ongoing discussion about the challenges of establishing one Islamic identity here in America. What does that mean? Okay, what does it mean to be an American Muslim? Is there anything such as American Muslim? What is the identity of a Muslim? How can you practice Islam in a Western society, which isn't governed by an Islamic legislation, which doesn't have an Islamic ruler, etc.? How do I practice this when my culture is kind of different from Islamic tenets or Islamic traditions or Islamic culture? How do I integrate all of this together? And I know a lot of times, often enough, we all want to know the answer to these particular questions. How do I practice Islam in the society that I live in, which isn't governed by Islam, nor have I been raised up that way? How do I, harmonize between the two? And hopefully within these discussions, we will try to answer those questions, inshallah. We will try to present some knowledge-based solutions and answers to help us readily to identify our Islamic identity and how to integrate that within societies that are non-Islamic governed, or rather is not governed by the Islamic Sharia, or doesn't have an Islamic ruler, such as America, for example. So Tayyib, we're going to talk about those different topics today, inshallah. And we're going to look into some definitions, because it's important to understand, again, definitions. So we're going to talk about culture. What is culture? All right, we're going to go into the definition of culture. What is considered American culture, which is very interesting, because if you understand American culture, you understand the American Muslim. All right, so I want you to pay attention to that definition when we cross it. All right, we're going to go over the definition of culture, and we're going to go over the definition of the American culture. All right, now remember, Islam also have a culture. Okay, that is not Arabized. That's not an Arab culture. Okay, it's not a specific group or culture. It has its own identity. Islam has its own identity. There are some Arab traditions which are incorporated within the Islamic culture. However, nonetheless, it's not to be considered an Arab culture. It's an Islamic culture, and we will discuss some of those things, inshallah. Getting into the definition of culture. What is considered to be culture? Okay. It is mentioned that culture can be defined, all right, as, and it's interesting because it seems that this word culture is all inclusive. It encompasses a lot. So to say culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institution of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society, such as it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, art. So we can see from just this definition alone how encompassing or how inclusive culture is. Okay? The way that you talk, the way that you eat, how you wear your clothes, fashion, all of that plays a part and tied in and include in culture. All right? In the definition of culture, all of that includes in the way that all of that is considered to be a part of culture. Now, how do we understand the American culture? The American culture is very interesting, right? Being as though the American culture, brothers and sisters, defining the American culture, it encompasses the customs and traditions of the United States. All right? Right? Because we're talking about America. So the United States, okay? Culture encompasses, and we already went over that, religion, food, what we wear, how we wear it, our language, marriage, music, and what we believe is right or wrong. How we sit at a table, how we greet visitors, how we behave with loved ones, and a million other things. Right? And this was actually brought up by the anthropologist Bonnet from the college in London. That was his statement on it. Defining the American culture is a simple term. Defining American culture in simple terms is not as easy as it may seem, because American culture is not only defined by its fast-paced lifestyle, fashion, and to-go coffee shops. It is also the culture of many diversity, different religions, races, and ethnicities. It is a culture that nourishes competition and political correctness, and also tries to enforce the freedom of speech. Some will say that American culture is a contradictory, a flux of different peoples and values. Okay, different people and values. Okay, so we can see from here that it is a melting pot. The U.S. is the third largest country or in the world, and it is one of the most diversified, and this is why they term it as a melting pot. It is one of the most diversifying countries, because it has a large influx of immigrants that makes up the United States. All right, and it is over 300 languages which are spoken in America. All right, over 300 languages. And even though predominantly English is the language, whether in business and so forth, is predominantly the leading language, English within America, nonetheless, it's still a melting pot. It have different values, it have different traditions, it have different customs from different walks, different ethnicities, different races. So you understand all of them coming together within America is what is going to create that diversity, which creates the American culture. Do you understand? If you truly understand this, then you understand what is American Muslim. American Muslim is a diversified Muslim. A Muslim that may be an immigrant, a Muslim that may be a native, but a Muslim nonetheless who have different values, different values, different customs, different traditions, that has, maybe be from his people, his own people, maybe from the society which he lives in, maybe be from America itself. You understand? But it is a diversification. So the American Muslim is just that. He's a diversified individual, right? How do we understand that? So we have to look at all of this, because some people want to say, okay, how do we deal with the American Muslim? Okay, the American Muslim, no doubt, is charged with certain things that we're going to bring up in this talk, inshallah, in this discussion, such as customs and traditions, which is extremely important. Okay, not culture. We already talked about culture, but customs and traditions. And right now, I have on a thobe. Okay, all right, I have a thobe, and even though the thobe is a part of the Islamic customs, all right, nonetheless, it still shares with another group of people culture, such as the Arabs, all right, and the way that they used to adorn their clothes. It's still sheer, is a cross sheer between that, right? Nonetheless, it still is a part of the Islamic culture as well. And how can that be? Is because the Prophet ﷺ is reported to said in different reports that it's mentioned, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ mentioned about the thobe and how it's to be worn, and he mentioned about the turban, and he mentioned about certain things. So those things were, and he mentioned within the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Nonetheless, right? Having on the thobe still mean what? I am still Muslim, right? And it's a part of a custom that is shared. But I'm getting ready to show you something different. Now, dressing like this, it's also part of the American fashion or custom, diversified, right? Nonetheless, still Muslim. It doesn't dictate that I have left the realm of Islam because I don't wear the custom thobe, okay? And we'll get into all of that. Some of the different rules pertaining to and how the scholars actually deal with those things, because they deal with it from a bab of fiqh. All right, we're going to get into all of that. The American Muslim, basically, we already explained that, is the Muslim that comes from a different background, a different set of values, traditions, customs. How does that Muslim readily identifies with the Islamic culture? Okay, that's the challenge. Okay, that's the challenge. You're not, one, raised in a Islamic state. Okay, two, you're not governed by the Islamic Sharia, the legislation and the laws of Islam. Three, you are a minority of the minority within a non-Islamic state. Four, do you understand? You are not accustomed to the Islamic values, traditions, and customs. So you may either be ignorant of Islamic culture, values, or customs, and which therefore puts you at a hindrance. It prevents you from readily accepting the Islamic judgment or the Islamic law. Okay? Now, this will take time to actually adopt the Islamic culture within a non-Islamic state. Okay? There are going to be challenges that you're going to have to face while living in a non-Islamic state. The biggest enemy that the American Muslim has is ignorance of one Islamic culture. That's your biggest enemy you're going to have. Not having the knowledge of your Islamic culture, which gives you your identity, actually. All right? Many of us might have some aspect, some knowledge about some customs, about some traditions, about some values that pertains to the religion that we profess to follow. Right? This is true. We might not know all, but we might have some. But then we have years of being raised with other traditions, of the customs, of the values that might conflict with what we profess to actually follow. All right? And when that conflict happened, and because we don't have the necessary knowledge to combat that, we normally surrender and yield towards what we already was accustomed to, right? And we adopt that, and we sometimes, out of mistake, place it with Islam because we happen to profess to follow Islam. And you find people doing this, making it seem like this is a part of the Islamic culture, when it has nothing to do with the Islamic culture. You just so happen to be an American Muslim, right, who profess to follow the Islamic culture, but you live in a total different culture, right? And you might be ignorant of the Islamic culture altogether. All right. Now, so when it comes to traditions and customs, just a general rule so that we understand that customs and traditions that clearly go against the Sharia, because now you have to understand how to deal with customs and traditions that that goes outside of Islam. This is your main thing about it, right? All right. Or which goes against the general aims of the Sharia, and which we should all know about the primary objectives or aims, which they call the maqasid Sharia. The maqasid Sharia, we should know what they are. It goes on, which may lead to the misunderstanding and shortcomings should be shunned, and efforts should be made to change them, which needs some wisdom and gentleness. Okay? It needs wisdom and gentleness. I'm an American Muslim. I've been raised off of music. I love arts. All right? I love certain type of food. I love fashion. I love television. I love shows. This is the way I've been raised, right? I adopt Islam. I accept Islam. But as I'm learning about Islam, I come across the fact that music is haram, okay? I come across the fact that certain things within television are haram, all right? How do I deal with that? How do I integrate that? How do I behave on that? Do I immediately stop listening to music? Do I cut the TV off or throw the TV off, throw the TV away out the home? Do I no longer wear the American fashion? This can never be a simple answer. If you find someone giving you a simple answer to this, then that's because they're ignorant and they don't understand. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's never a simple answer that you tell someone you just stop doing whatever you're doing that you have been accustomed to for 20 years. My proof now, because I've just been talking, I haven't bring any proof yet, but I'm getting ready to bring some proof. My proof of this is how Allah have dealt with the earlier Muslims. When Allah Jalla wa'ala came in, he did not come with prohibitions. He came with something very, very formidable, which we should adopt in dealing with that. He came in with teaching about the beliefs, purifying the heart. Okay, they call this tarbiyah also, right? This tarbiyah, this cultivation is extremely important even in our times. No matter where you at and no matter who you are, no matter what society you're raised in, you cannot forgo the tarbiyah that is necessary. The cleaning and the cleansing of those superstitions, those ideologies, those concepts, those beliefs that you have been accustomed to and been raised to have to be purified. You're going to have to wipe them out in order to embrace the new. So you're going to have to empty your cup, so to speak. And that might take time. Do you understand? As it took time for the earlier generation. So Allah didn't start off with stop drinking khamr. He did not command them to give up drinking khamr first. Do you understand? He did not command them. Our mother, Aisha, anha, she says in this profound hadith, have Allah started with the prohibition first, it would have chased the people away. They wouldn't have done it. It would have been difficult upon them if you would have came to them and told them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And they don't understand the necessity of or the harms or the benefits to outweigh it to know why they shouldn't do it. So this is important. So Allah didn't start that way. He gradually built them and cleansed their heart, and by cleansing their heart, he solidified their belief to make a strong connection so that when the Creator did command them, it was easy for them to follow. This still has to take place in our day and age. All right, you still have to look at that. When you have people raised in a foreign society, whether in the West or whether in the East, which isn't, and when I mean by foreign, meaning that it's not has not been raised under the Islamic values, traditions, customs, and culture, right? When you have people raised like that, you still have to do that same format that Allah Jalla wa'ala has laid down, okay? And hoping them to understand. So it's not a simple answer. It's not a simple answer. You might come from a society where the people, the family don't get together except that is on holidays. It's the only time that the family come together is on holidays. You might have been raised like that, especially the American Muslim. The American Muslim has been raised like that. The family don't see each other unless there is a holiday. That's when they're off. That's how the society they live in. Okay, we get our vacation here. I can see all the family come together, right? You have accepted Islam. You are told about different fatwa that tells you that you cannot go to the festivities of the non-believers. You cannot congratulate them on their holidays. You can't do any of these things. So what do you do when the only opportunity you have to see all of the family, all right, is during the holiday? Do you now say, I alienate my family, I don't deal with my family because they are celebrating the holiday? Or do you look at this from a fiqh point of view, okay, having some understanding here that maybe there can be some exceptions that need to be made because, again, the intention is important. If I go around my family, you understand, and we're going to get into that. So there are some things you need to know that we're able to harmonize that. So what we advise individuals is that if this is your circumstance where you only can see your family because you live here in the West and you're an American Muslim, and Christmas is the only time you can see all of your family together, and we know the narrations of keeping the ties, the kinship, we say go, but with conditions. Go, but be mindful of conditions. And here, whenever we find ourselves the minority, not governed in the Islamic state with an Islamic ruler and not governed by the Islamic Sharia, then we have to work by what we call maxims. They call them qawad fiqhiyya, which we have to work by. And those maxims, as Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ fi Surah Al-Ghabun. Fear Allah as much as you are able. This is a maxim, brothers and sisters. This is a fiqh maxim. Fear Allah much as you is able. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ittaqullaha haythuma kunt. Fear Allah Jalla wa Ala wheresoever you may be. Okay? Taking in consideration your location, your situation, your circumstances. How can you fear Allah? In this circumstances, do I not go because it's a holiday season and I can't see my family and I might cut off the ties of kinship, or do I go? You understand? The Prophet ﷺ reported this from the hadith of Abu Hurairah. مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُمْ فَجَتَنِبُوهُ. Whatever I prohibit you from, stay away from it altogether. وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Whatever I command you of, do much of it that you are able to do. Right? In this beautiful hadith. How do you carry it out? So when you're in a situation that the American Muslim in, you don't go to an extreme. You cannot behave like you under Islamic law because you aren't under Islamic law. You have two things against you when you think about that. One, you're not even educated in Islamic law. Two, you're not accustomed to living in a society that dictates Islamic law. So you're not going to move and behave in that way. You are a minority, so you have to move according to your circumstances. That means you're going to have to move according to these qawad fiqhiyya, fear Allah much as you are able. And that fear of Allah has got to be contingent on the knowledge that you have of Allah and His deen. Okay? And what I mean by that, the belief that you have in Allah, which is very important, your belief, and also what you know about Allah Jalla wa Ala, halal wa haram, His commands and His prohibition. Do you understand? So all of that have to be contingent upon that. You know, and so you'll find an individual going to this holiday festival, but he's not going with the intention to celebrate Christmas. He's going because the society which he lives in only allows him the opportunity to see his family during this time. So his intention is not the same as someone who sees their family and all of their family anytime that they want to, and they come to it, right? Now, that leads me to my other thing. That's why I said that if a person does go, there are conditions. Shaykh Uthaymeen rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, he mentioned that when a Muslim comes from a Islamic state to go to a non-Islamic state, the scholars have laid down conditions for that Muslim to travel to a non-Islamic state. Okay? And the conditions which they have laid down, one of them is that the person must be strong in the knowledge and the application of their deen. Do you understand? One must be strong in the knowledge and application of their deen. Why is this important? Why are these conditions laid down? So that they don't become influenced by what they see and what they experience in the non-Islamic state from the non-believers. So they have to have certain conditions. So if an individual know himself that he's not strong to intermingle with his family during these holidays, during this holiday time, which is an opportunity for them, then they have to take this in consideration. Would he be weak? Would he congratulate them on their kufr? Right? If you say Merry Christmas, you're congratulating them on their kufr, whether you want to believe that or not. You understand? And if you think it's harmless, which it isn't, it's not harmless to say that. It's actually not, because what you just said to the non-believer is that you just gave them recognition of their holiday being okay. And they're going to look at, okay, here's my Muslim relative telling me to do such and such. If you feel as though you're going to be weak and you cannot stop yourself from congratulating them, which is impermissible for you to do in the first place, then you might don't want to go in that setting, because you don't have the necessary knowledge to actually combat being influenced by that setting. And another thing you want to take in consideration, if this is your only window of opportunity, then you want to go there and you want to make sure your intermingling is done limited as possible, because during these times we have to keep it realistic. There are going to be celebration taking place. There's going to be music, there's going to be partying, there's going to be all of this different stuff that's going to be taking place, whether you want it to happen or not. You know the society you're in, you know that you're American Muslim, so you want to intermingle less as possible, but you want to also maintain that kinship. So father, you saw me, I came, I showed up, I conversed with you. Mother, you saw me, I came, I showed up, I conversed with you. Aunt, uncle, cousin, nephew, etc., etc., brother, sister, you seen me. I came through, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to leave you be nice and calmly and go about my business. And I still keep the relationship between us throughout the year. I can't see you physically as often as we get together now, but I came and showed my thing. You don't stay for the entire duration. That is not from hikmah. It's not wise, because you don't know how much you're going to be influenced by what's taking place at the celebration. So these are things you want to definitely take in consideration when dealing with this stuff. So I'm going to bring some statements from some of the scholars to help us understand when we deal with traditions and customs and the ruling pertaining to it. So Imam Sa'di, rahimahullah, he says, the basic principle with regards to customs is that they are permissible. That's the basic general rule, that when we look at customs and traditions, their general rule is that they are permissible. They are halal. We don't say that they're haram from the door. We don't say that they're impermissible from the door. When it comes to customs and traditions, we normally say the general rule is that they are permissible, right? Then he continues, though. He says, he says, unless it is narrated in the Sharia that they are forbidding. Okay. Now, if we got a clear-cut text, either from the Quran or the Sunnah, right, or which has been derived from the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it be via ijma, right, then, or qiyas rather, then what we look at is we're going to stay away from that custom or that tradition because it will go against the Sharia. You understand? Sheikh Ibn Baz, look what he says next. Sheikh Ibn Baz, rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, he says, what every Muslim must do is accept customs. He says here, what every Muslim must do is not accept customs blindly. Rather, he should measure them against the Sharia. Whatever is approved of is permissible for him to do. Otherwise, he should not do it. The fact that people are accustomed to something is not evidence that it is permissible. My family have been practicing Christianity all my life. That doesn't mean that Christianity is the right way or it's permissible for me to join partners with Allah. You understand? My family have been doing such and such all their lives. This is a tradition that we do. This is custom that we do. It doesn't make it necessarily right. That isn't evidence in and of itself, especially when it comes to your deen. And this is why I say that the biggest enemy that the American Muslim has is being ignorant of his Islamic culture. Do you understand? That's one of the challenges that you have to face. So you don't have to, every scholar you see and say, okay, or every student of knowledge, you got to say, well, how do I practice Islam in America? People ask these questions. How do I practice Islam? What they basically trying to say is, how do I integrate my Islamic culture with that of my American culture? All right? And it already has been answered for you, but sometimes it have to be laid out so that you can see it. And that's hopefully what these discussions will do. We're going to go into them individually to help us understand that. But Sheikh Ibn Baz is saying that when it comes to customs and tradition, we should never blindly accept them. All right? Even though the general rule is that they are permissible, like Imam Sa'di saying, is that we now have to weigh them towards the Quran and the Sunnah. All right? And if you don't have knowledge what is contained within the Quran and the Sunnah, then you should have caution. Okay? And we get that from the Prophet ﷺ hadith when he says, Inna halal haram wa inna haram bayan haram. Inna halal bayan wa inna haram bayan wa baynahuma umur mutashabiha. In al-hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in his beautiful hadith that indeed the permissible, the halal, is made clear. The haram, the impermissible, is made clear. And whatever is in between those is a gray matter. Okay, normally he mentioned mutashabihat, meaning it's doubtful. So caution should be used here in this circumstance. So if you don't know a tradition or a custom, right, and you are questionable about it, then you should proceed with caution and utilizing that until you are able to learn, ask, seek, get the proper information, whether it goes against the Islamic legislation or not. All right. And you might say, well, I don't live in an Islamic state that is governed by Islamic legislation. You can't get away because that's not the case. You still have to fear Allah much as you are able. Do you understand? This is why you have to understand that point when we said you're governed by that fiqhiyah, that maximum. You're governed by that. You still have to fear Allah much as you're able. So if you think about it, even though we are a minority, there's a lot of things that we can do to practice within our Islamic culture, here being a minority in a non-Islamic state. And we know this to be true. So we have masajid, right? We even have Islamic schools, right? We have things that we can do far as culture, far as clothes that we can wear, all right? That shows an Islamic identity. Far as food, okay, far as certain things that can be done. We know that these are some of the rules that are laid out for us, okay? So the American Muslim must understand that. You're going to still be governed. You're not governed by the Sharia, but you're governed by the Qawaid Fiqhiyya. You're governed by fearing Allah much as possible. Sheikh Uthaymeen, rahmatullah ta'ala alayhi, he says about this tradition, he says in his tafsir Surah Baqarah, he says tradition does not make something that is not prescribed permissible, because Allah says, and the interpretation of the meaning is that laysa al-bir, it is not al-bir, piety or righteousness, that you enter the houses from the back. All right? Customarily or traditionally, they will come from the back when coming to a house. Allah said this is not considered to be al-bir. It's not considered to be outrighteous. Even though this is a custom or traditional thing that you do, it's not considered to be righteous. You know what I'm saying? Even if you have been raised that way. All my life, my family been coming through the back door. I accept Islam, and now you're telling me I can't come through the back door? Right? You want to think that this has got to be right. All my family been teaching me all my life. I know that this is right, and this is what we got to be extremely careful of. That's why the importance of emptying your cup to embrace the Islamic culture is extremely important. The American Muslim challenge lies in educating himself about the Islamic culture. You understand? Not worrying whether so much what I can integrate, what of my American values I can keep, my American customs I can keep, my American traditions I can keep, what from the American culture I can keep. You shouldn't be fighting for that. You should be fighting to educate yourself about the Islamic customs, the Islamic culture, the Islamic tradition, and the Islamic values, because within that will become the answer of how to deal with the customs, traditions, and values of the American culture. You see? If you apply yourself to learn that, then you'll be able to you'll know how to deal with it more better. And I'm getting ready to stop, inshallah. So we'll bring some more statements of the scholars here before we stop. He brings a statement of Imanawi, I believe. All right. And the scholars regarded adherence to customs and traditions that cause hardship for people and lead to some evil consequences or hardship and disputes and difficulty as blameworthy extremism, and as the kind of affectation and going to extremes that is forbidden in Islam. It was narrated from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Those who go extremes are doomed." He said it 3 times. This is collected by Imanawi. This is collected by Imam Muslim. Imanawi rahimahullah says in the explanation to Imam Muslim, he says those who go extreme and exaggerate in their words and deeds. That's what he said. Shaykh Uthaymeen rahmatullah ta'ala, he explained in speaking on the different types of extremism, gulu, he said the 4th category is to go extremes in one customs, which is adhering too strongly to ancient customs and not turning to that which is better than that, but the customs are equal to others in serving a valid purpose. Then adhering to one's own custom is better than turning to foreign customs. And we need to understand that. How do we understand the custom? How do we understand the tradition? We need to know that the general rule is that we weigh it towards the Islamic Sharia, but most of us are ignorant when it comes to the Islamic Sharia. All right? Being in the Islamic state have multiple advantages, and one of the advantages is that the Islamic law can be what? Tanfeed. It can actually be applied. You're going to have people actually pushing it. We don't live in that type of state where those things can be pushed. All right. So we have to fear Allah Jalla best of our ability, but we have to educate ourselves on that. One of the biggest crux of the American society and the Western culture put together, all together, that we have, one of the biggest problems that we have is that they preach certain ideologies that are detrimental and harmful from the just from its conception. And an agenda that has been pushed by the atheists is what we call liberalism, fiqhiyya, okay? A lot of Muslims today don't understand the harm in liberalism. You understand? A lot of Muslims, they believe that, no, I should be at liberty to do what I want, how I want, when I want, and that's that. That's not true. Do you understand? That isn't true. And we already see the ramifications of practicing liberalism. We see being at liberty to do whatever you want to do. We see the harms of that because now we are over 16 to 17 different types of genders. There's only a male and a female, but now somehow we got 17. How did we get from a male and a female? How can you even get from a male and a female to make 17 different genders, right? But this is what liberty does. This is what freedom of speech does. This is with having the opportunity, right? No, I can identify what I want to identify. Don't call me a male. I might have a male penis, but I'm not a male. You can't acknowledge me as such. You have to call me something else, right? Because of liberty. So you see the ramification of that? You see the harm of that, all right? That's a harm, right? Who is you to tell me that I cannot go outside right now and knock somebody over the head and take their stuff from them? I have liberty to do what I want to do. No, you need laws because that would be fawda. It would be chaos. That would be chaotic if it's not checked. You understand? If somebody can believe that, and somebody can argue with that. I believe that I can have how many women I want to have. There shouldn't be no society to tell me that because this is what liberalism breeds. When a person is free to do and think like they want to, they don't believe they go outside of what they can be governed of the laws. You understand? And that becomes a problem, and it becomes pragmatic. So one of the most dangerous harms of the Western culture and the American culture is that liberty. That's one of the things that they push. And in Islam, in your Islamic cultures, brothers and sisters, we don't have liberty. Okay? We don't have liberty. We are not free to do what we want because we have Sharia. And if we have Sharia, that means we are governed by laws and legislations which prohibit us to do and say and act however we want. You understand? Even though there's no one in this society, the ruler is not pressing the Islamic laws on us, then we have to fear law to the best of our abilities and not doing those things. Right? Yep. That's another perfect example. May Allah Jalla reward you, brother. The brother mentioned how here in especially in Philadelphia, they have a certain time where people ride around downtown or down South Street rather on bikes naked, right? And no matter who's out there, whether it's kids out there, whoever, they can see naked people riding on bicycles, right? This is what liberty does because of that liberty. So they could argue and say, okay, we are able to do that. We got nude beaches. We are able to do that, you see? And that's the harm and ramification of that. We ask Allah Jalla wa'ala to make us strong and to educate us about our Islamic culture, values, traditions, and customs. Stay tuned, inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters. We will be doing an ongoing discussion on this, and we will try to take our time to deal with each subject that we have witnessed by being American Muslim. I am American Muslim. I don't know about a lot of you. I know a lot of you that's watching are American Muslims. All right. We can practice Islam still being American. Okay. It does not mean because you're an American, you can't practice Islam. All right. You still can practice Islam being American. I hope that this series will give us that. It's going to hope that it would give us that insight that you can be an American Muslim and at the same time, you still can hold on to your Islamic culture. All right. Whatever we said that was incorrect, inshallah ta'ala, this is like the introduction. What we said was incorrect is from ourselves, and the shaitan, what we said is correct is from Allah Jalla wa ala. Subhanakallah wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.